Hey students, this is Mr. Phillips, and today is the second episode of my top 5 lit list for John Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men. Just sit back and relax. Let's talk about the top 5 things I think you should know from chapter 2. Let's do this. Starting things off, let's talk about distance learning for a moment. The main thing I want to discuss here is grades. It's kind of on everyone's mind, and every school is different, and we as our school should know our policy. But here's what I want to say. Let's not focus so hard on grades. They're important, yes, but instead, I think this is a great opportunity for us all to kind of step up, finish the year well, and learn together. So if you have questions about your grade, just kind of let me know. I'll help you through it. But really the focus to me is never on the grade itself, but it's what you get from the class. So that pretty much sums up what I was going to talk about. So let's get into the latest reading, Chapter 2 of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck.
First on the list, number 5.
Number 5 is something I definitely want to discuss before I talk about anything else, and that is the use of the N-word in Chapter 2 and kind of throughout the rest of the book. Now, the language used is to identify a stable buck, which is a derogatory name for an African-American man who works in the stables, kind of an older term that we're not familiar with. And I want to say that, yes, it will appear throughout the book, and I'm not going to read it aloud in my read-alongs, just as I wouldn't read it in class because of my station in life. I don't feel that, I am appropriately able to use that word, even in a scholarship setting. Now, speaking of scholarship, if you want to look into more about the use of the N-word, especially in classic literature, I recommend you look up an article called Straight Talk about the N-word. It is written by an Arizona State University professor. His name is Neil Lester. And if you're looking for more information and just a little bit of a deeper dive into that side of it, then I definitely recommend Straight Talk about the N-word by Neil Lester. You'll be able to find it with a simple Google search. We haven't met the character, but we will in a later chapter. But just so everyone knows, I picked that as my number 5 thing just because I would talk about it in class, and now we kind of know the policy on that. I'll just omit it and try to make it work without using the word. All right, so that is the 5th thing on my list.
Number 4.
For number 4, no pun intended, I chose the old man. Now, the chapter describes him as an old swamper in other ways, or just picture your typical old man who's worked a lot in his life, done hard labor most of his life, and he is the first person really to talk to George and Lenny about the ranch. Now, he really only talks to George, but we get the impression that this old man has seen a lot. He's an insider. However, he's really dependent on being able to just kind of hang around the ranch, work where he can, and you get the sense that he's had a lot of hard luck in his life. That's further shown by his old smelly dog that follows him around. You'll see some of the other ranch hands complain about this old dog, but it's kind of nice for this old man to have a companion that has seen the things that he has seen in his life. And what does George get from the old man? Very vital information about the workings and the inner workings, the personal dynamics of the ranch that they are now new to, right? George and Lenny are newcomers. This old man has lots of, at least, if not wisdom, experience in the dealings. What is the boss like? What is the boss's son like? How are the conditions? What's the food? some of these things they're able to do casually in conversation. And George is actually really skilled at extracting the information from the old man, who seems to be fine with just talking to George. So that's why I have him at number 4 on my list, the old man.
Number 3.
At number 3, I chose the boss. Now, the boss, when I say the boss, I mean the boss of the ranch. And we see him come in early in chapter 2 to talk to George. And as he's talking to George, you can see that he is not a pushover. He's upset that they didn't come in the day before to work like they were supposed to. And he's like, what the heck? Do I really want you guys on my farm? Or sorry, not a farm really, a ranch, if you're not going to do the work. He's testing out his new employees. And George talks around it, as George is very good at to get them out of trouble. George blames the ride that drops them off 10 miles and they had to walk, which is why they were late. They kind of got lost, is his excuse. And as he's doing this, Lenny kind of makes the mistake of opening his mouth a little bit. He says something, and that turns the boss's attention on Lenny, and he starts to question Lenny. And George is very much trying to keep his attention on George, but it doesn't really work. And the boss is kind of nervous that Lenny doesn't sound, all there. He's kind of wary of him, but he does see how big and strong he is. George gets out of this little predicament by saying that Lenny was kicked in the head by a horse earlier on in life, which kind of explains why he's a little slow. And the boss buys this, and he's like, all right, you guys start tomorrow. Welcome to the ranch. And later, Lenny asks George, he's like, why'd you tell him I got kicked in the head? I wasn't kicked in the head by a horse. And George says, I know, but I had to. He was asking questions. I just had to get him off our back, basically. And that is kind of crucial, as it shows the way George and Lenny have operated for so long. And it just gives us a better picture of the type of place that George and Lenny find themselves working. So at number 3, we have the boss.
Number 2.
At number 2, I have a very important character whose name is Slim. Slim is number 2 on the list today. He is the leader of the workers, as it seems to be the leader. He's respected. He's shown to be wise. And he seems to read George and Lenny, their personalities, their relationship, all the dynamics between them right off the bat. He nails them right away. He kind of understands what their gig is. He's a guy that's not going to put up with any BS, and the other workers really follow him. When I say he's not going to put up with BS, it means he understands how life works. He's seen it all, kind of a guy. And he is the moral center of the story. He's kind, and he's going to do the right thing, and he's going to help as many people as he can while earning his honest living. Now, it is an interesting thing to note that he had a dog that just had a litter of puppies, which seems to play right into what Lenny is hoping for. So there's some play there that George might try to leverage. But as he sits down with George and talks to him about kind of the ranch and the work that they're going to do and who they are, they really all automatically make a connection, as Slim is going to do with anyone who works for him. He's going to make a quick connection and almost instantly win you over, just because he's that kind of a guy. He's nice. He knows what he's talking about, and he's not going to be fooled by anybody. And he's really going to be on everyone's side. He just wants things to go really well. And I find that, as in this story, that is a huge thing for us to remember and to look for in the chapters to follow. Number 2 on the list, Slim.
Finally, number 1 on my list this week.
Last and certainly not least, At number 1, we have Curly and Curly's Wife, 2 characters I put at the top of the list this week. We meet both of them in chapter 2. I'm going to start with Curly because I believe we see him both, and by we I mean Lenny and George see him first. Curly is aggressive. He is the son of the boss, and he has kind of a short man syndrome. And what the characters and what most people refer to short man syndrome as is if he, as a short person, is going to have a chance to build himself up and to look tough, he is going to take that. So when he sees Lenny, before even hearing him or anything else, he's got a mind already to mess with Lenny, to fight with Lenny, just because he's big and looks intimidating. Because if Curly, the short guy and son of the boss, can intimidate a big guy, that must mean that he is intimidating. The fact that he's the boss's son also gives him this false set of confidence. Another thing is, like, he was a boxer. He must have won a boxing competition early on in life, and that kind of added to his persona. And so we see Curly right away trying to pick trouble with Lenny. But the other character that we need to talk about is Curly's wife. She seems like a flirt, and they had just gotten married. And if you just get married and you are flirting around, as George quickly picks up on, right? He says, wow, that sounds like, if she's a flirt, he mentions the word tramp and some other words. And when she walks in the door, she definitely has this air of flirtation to her that is going to be trouble for anybody who comes in contact with her. Specifically, here, George and Lenny, who are the newcomers, right? She's trying to work the power that she can at all times. And after George and Lenny meet both Curly and Curly's wife, Lenny wants to leave the ranch. He doesn't want to work because he doesn't like the conflict that he sees between Curly and Curly's wife. Lenny's an honest guy. He thinks that Curly's wife is pretty, and he knows that's going to be trouble, and he doesn't want to fight Curly. And so he says, George, let's leave. And George is like, I wish we could, but we have to make some money. We have to stay here and tough it out. Stay away from Curly, Lenny. Stay away from Curly. Even if he wants to fight you, don't fight him. And then later, the chapter ends. Curly's looking for his wife, and they kind of stay away from that mine, as it were. If you step on that, Curly's going to blow up, and then there's going to be trouble. And to me, that is the biggest source of conflict so far. Not just the dream that George and Lenny have, like, yes, that's kind of in the background, but right up in the forefront, we have this explosion waiting to happen between Curly and Curly's wife, which is why I put that at the top of my list, number 1 for this week. And now it's time for the call to action. Do you see any parallels in chapter 2 to the real world? Perhaps you know a Curly type character, or maybe a Curly's wife type of person. Perhaps you know someone that makes you think of Slim, right? That kind and moral leader who everyone respects and is wise, doesn't take any BS. Maybe you know someone who reminds you of just the boss, right? Who is just trying to do his life and work and take care of what he can take care of. How do you react when George and Lenny meet all those characters? Do you know the old man who is good for information and maybe just needs a friend? And always, as is always important to keep in mind in society, is just the language that we use to talk about each other and the history that goes into the English language. That's all I have for today. Thank you so much for listening to episode 2. Fill out that Google form, and I will see you hopefully soon. If you have a question, send me an email and come and see me anytime. Have a great day, guys.